Number 2, to carry on talking about Lorna Wing's Asperger syndrome, a clinical account, which was written in 1991. Yeah, so she talks about how all of the features of Asperger syndrome can be found in the general population. All of the features. I was saying my brother has got quite a number of features, but he's not autistic because he's basically normal. He's a little bit eccentric. I guess he would be one of those people where you can see a lot of the features, but he definitely wouldn't be diagnosed with anything because he functions normally. And that's what I think. Like for example, my brother, as a kid, he memorised the whole of a train network in the UK, and he memorised and collected tickets, and he had extremely pedantic interest, like down to every single detail. And he wasn't the most social of people, and unlike me, he did have more social skill, and he could like interact a bit more normally. But he was kind of quite yeah, he had some speech difficulties as a young child, and he actually saw a speech therapist for it because he couldn't pronounce certain words. And yeah, so like really subtle things like that. But he's definitely not autistic though, because the difference between him and me is that he's very laid back, and like he doesn't have a need that I do for, like he doesn't get distressed like I do when things change and stuff, and he isn't as sensitive as I am. And he can have relationships and stuff, and he can also, crucially, have a normal job, and like is absolutely fine at his job, more than fine, like really competent, and he can adult and live independently. So it would be, although he does have features of Asperger's, but again, so do many normal people, and it would be absolutely absurd for these people to get diagnosed. And yet I feel this is what is happening in some like celebrities. Like for example, if my brother was a celebrity like Melanie Sykes, and he wanted to do a TV production or something, and he could then like just essentially, if he wanted to, I'm sure he could buy a diagnosis if he wanted to, even though he's not autistic. And I think the same is true for people like Sykes. I don't think they're autistic, but because they've got money and clout and influence, they can easily persuade someone to diagnose them, even though they're not actually autistic. That's what I think. I think they're just eccentric, normal people who may have like autistic genes, because she's got an autistic kid. Just as my brother's related to me, he might share some of the genes. But it's a big stretch to say these people are autistic when they're functioning so normally. Like Sykes is functioning normally. If she wasn't, she wouldn't have been able to do her job for all them years. That's what I think. So yeah, all of the features can be found in the general population. That's why Asperger's can be quite difficult to diagnose. I guess like people like me are clear-cut cases in a sense. Like when I got diagnosed, it was really easy and straightforward. And I think part of the reason it was so easy and straightforward is because all of my issues were there since I was at school, and I had like school reports and cognitive assessments and educational psychology report from when I was at primary school, and my parents had like a good memory of my early childhood, and it's really clear from early on that I was like different basically. But I guess if you don't have all of that evidence, how can you tell that this person isn't just a normal eccentric person? That's the thing, particularly as people with Asperger's can come across as normal. Like you wouldn't know unless you collected the evidence really. So yeah, I guess it does become a bit harder like a borderline case, where there isn't like a clear pathology. No, you're not supposed to say a word, I don't care, going on. Yeah, she also says there's a tendency to take these literally, but she said this can also be found in normal people. So yeah, tendency to take this literally. Normal people can have a tendency to take this literally. It doesn't necessarily mean they're autistic in and of itself. And in actual fact, if you take any of the potential symptoms of autism or Asperger's, all of them can occur in the general population. It doesn't mean anything in and of itself. It only means something when not only are they all occurring together, but they're causing clinically significant impairment. It's even possible for all of the symptoms to occur together, but if they're not causing clinically significant impairment because they're not severe enough, the person isn't autistic, they're just eccentric. They're at that borderline sort of point, and it would be absurd to diagnose them. Even if they they may well have some autistic genes going on, but that still doesn't mean they're autistic, do you know what I mean? So yeah, she says some at the extreme end of normal continuum could have all of the features and so be diagnosed as Asperger's, even though they're just at the extreme end of the normal continuum. But if they have all of the features, they could be diagnosed as Asperger's. But it'd obviously be a very, very, very mild case. Maybe that's what Sykes is, at the extreme end of the normal continuum. But many cases, the problems are so marked that suggestions of a distinct pathology seems more plausible explanation than a variant of normality. That would be the case for me. I'll say that again. But in many cases, the problems are so marked that a suggestion of a distinct pathology seems more plausible explanation than a very normality. To put it another way, if everyone was like me, the world would come to a stop, because I can't work. And clearly that's quite a rare thing. If everyone was like me, like, the world would literally come to a stop. So how can that be a normal variation? That has to be some form of pathology. And I do use the correct language here. I don't care about using these medical words, because that's what it is. It's a pathology. I speak the truth. That's what it is. It's a pathology. I'm not going to hide from that. I don't like hiding things, you know. It's a pathology. Call it what it is. The lack of empathy, single-mindedness, social isolation of people with Asperger's. That's interesting language. The lack of empathy. See, we never hear that nowadays, do we? So that's what it is. People get confused about that because they think that lack of empathy means the person doesn't care or is feelingless, but it doesn't mean that's not what it means at all. It's more like a 2-year-old who's egocentric and doesn't want to share their toys. It's not like in a malicious way. It's just that we're very in our own heads and we can't perspective take. That's what it means. It doesn't mean you wish ill on other people or a bad person or anything. But that's the confusion. People get confused. We can actually be very, very caring, more so than many normal people, about what's going on in the world and stuff, and the least likely to be malicious or anything like that. Asperger's people are actually the least likely to be malicious. Obviously that's generalisation and there are exceptions, but that's not what a lack of empathy in this context means. It simply means that we can't perspective take. Maybe that's my problem. I just cannot see the perspective of the NDM, but they can't see my side either, so you know. And she also talks about how Asperger's is useful for people who have autistic features but talk grammatically and are not socially aloof. She says this profile can be very perplexing as there is no total withdrawal, unlike you see in classic autism. So people might like notice autistic features and be like, oh, this child looks like they're autistic, but because they're not socially aloof and like wanting to interact and everything, people might kind of poo-poo the idea of autism. I know that's what's happened for me when I was growing up, because my mum used to often mention autism. It was often in the vocabulary when I was growing up. I didn't know what autism meant, but she would often like comment on like autistic behaviours, like when I shied away from cuddles and stuff, or I wasn't very affectionate. And she she said, you're behaving like an autistic child. I didn't know what autism was, but so I didn't know. I knew it was something bad in inverted commas, but I didn't know what it was. But I later spoke to my mum about this. She said the reason why they didn't do anything much at the time was because I was happy, very happy, energetic, which is always a good sign. Child is energetic, you know, and happy and lively, you know, and I was, yeah, basically, and alert, very alert. So my parents had concerns about me, but because I wasn't behaving like a classic autistic person, you know, they were worried about the implications of diagnosis for future career. Obviously, we now know it's not even possible for me anyway. So yeah, and I think obviously there's a lot less awareness of these things back then anyway. So that can provide mean an enigma, basically. I was described it as enigma. The case study finishes with a look through some classic cases of Asperger's. So we have case study 1. As a baby, this individual was always placid and smiley and rarely cried. Now that's really interesting, because when I was a baby, I was said to be one of the easiest babies to look after. That's part of the reason why my parents ended up having another kid. I was so easy to look after because I hardly ever cried, although when I did cry, it was extremely loud. And I had a really loud cry. My cry was actually the loudest in the hospital, my mum said. It was so loud. But I didn't cry that often, and I was actually a very easy baby to look after, and I was very smiley and happy, just like this individual was as described in one of his case studies, which is quite interesting. But it was when I became a toddler that I became difficult to manage, because I had extreme tantrums that went on and on and on, way longer than like normal toddler tantrums. But as a baby, I was fine. And was, yeah, very smiley. So this individual was slow in acquiring self-care skills. Yeah, I was slow in acquiring self-care skills. Took me ages to learn how to dress myself, do up buttons and stuff like that. Referred to himself as third person until 45 years old, same as me. No friends, same as me. Remained socially isolated, same as me. Particularly poor at subjects needing comprehension of sequence of events. Yeah, same as me. In actual fact, I was taken out of class as a kid to put photos in order, which I used to love because I love photos. I can't remember whether this was, I don't know whether this was part of the educational psychology assessment I had or whether this was just normal teaching assistant's work, because it could have been the educational psychology assessment, but I do remember being taken out of class and having to put photos in order. And although I loved the photos in the box, I found it really, really difficult because I didn't understand the sequence of events, which I guess requires theory of mind as well to be able to do that. And then we have case study 2, which is another typical case. Ask the same questions over and over again, regardless of the answers given. Apparently I used to do that a lot, and it drove my mum absolutely mad. Memory excellent and enabled them to pass exams in subjects learnt by rote. Yeah, I could do that. I really struggled at school with learning, and if it wasn't for my parents, I wouldn't have got any grades. But because I had a good memory, and because my dad wrote everything out for me, I essentially just learnt it and memorised it, and that's how I passed exams, just by memorising it, because I have a good great memory. Case 3, age of 5, their reading age was 9, but their comprehension was poor, same as me. I had a massive split between my reading and comprehension. Afraid of climbing, I was really afraid of climbing. My mum used to try to make me do climbing and I was terrified of it. Problems with buttons, laces, yeah, same with me. And then we have case 4, where their verbal is in the average range, but performance is very much lower, being mildly retarded range. We don't use the word retarded anymore. But yeah, same with me, but I have an even bigger split than that. My performance is in what they used to call the retarded range, but like it was only like 53 when I was, or something like that when I was a kid, the performance, whereas the verbal was like, just think it's slightly above average range. And now it's in the superior, my verbal's in the superior range, but for non-verbal, it's still on the first percentile, which is shocking. And they performed poorly on any task where elements had to be organised into coherent whole, same with me. Spends time reading and amassing facts, same as me. Childish tantrums if thwarted, same as me. Never good at practical tasks. The parents tended to do things for them. If they asked her to do some task, she would begin but soon stop and turn to her own preferred activity, such as reading. Yeah, same as me. So that was case 4. So yeah, very interesting, and a lot. Obviously, I've only read out to you some of this because it's a very long summary of classic Asperger syndrome, but that was written in 1991, and I think it's clear to see how much I fit into that classical profile of someone with Asperger's. It very much annoys me that they got rid of Asperger's, but now, of course, it doesn't mean anything because of people like Melanie Sykes, which really annoys me. So, thank you for watching.